So I'm a psychologist, so I always think in terms of individuals. I'm wondering what you think we can do as individuals, like those of us in the room, those of us who hear you. What can we each do to embrace a more common humanity kind of tribalism rather than the common enemy kind of tribalism, as John Haidt and Greg Lukianoff talk about? What can we do? What are specific actions that we can take?
Great. I'm excited about this question, actually, because I think that if you just listen to social media and cable news, I mean, I can't even do it anymore. You get this one impression. But if you look, I've traveled the country, or you just even in a quiet room with lots of my students, I think most people have your view. It's exhausting to feel so much, acrimony all the time. So, first of all, I've come across all these amazing organizations that are trying to do these bipartisan things. JD and I just did this thing yesterday. I'd never heard of it. It's called With Honor. It's like a veterans group that, again, is trying to be bipartisan and reach out. There's Better Angels. But I have an idea that I thought it was this original idea on my part, but I've been getting all these emails from very famous people and then from like 10th graders with the same idea. And it's the idea of I guess you could call it like a public national service program. I think it'd be hard to make it mandatory, but here's the idea. Right now, a lot of our high school kids, especially privileged kids, will go off to do a gap year after high school. They'll go to Australia or Amsterdam or Guatemala, often with their own privileged friends, but they will do amazing, wonderful things. I'm not knocking that. But what if we had a program, or we incentivized a program, where Americans from Manhattan or LA or San Francisco would go to another part of America where they would ordinarily never go and work side by side with other young Americans, and not in a condescending way. Not like, let's educate you. I mean, this is always this big problem JD identifies, but really side by side. So I actually have a couple research assistants there who did Teach for America and Peace Corps, who are actively trying to build this. So that's the kind of thing that that I'm thinking of.
So just one thought in response. I don't know if I saw Arthur Brooks earlier, but I don't know if he's actually here. But he got me this sweater, so I have to say nice things about him. But Arthur talks about the power of individual storytelling. And when I think about Hillbilly Elegy and why it was ultimately successful, I do think that whether it's talking about issues that are of special concern to minorities or to the white working class or to any particular group, actually telling a story about a human experience that's real is a lot more persuasive than just throwing a purely data-driven argument at somebody. Now, of course, the data is important, and I think it's important that our arguments are ultimately informed by the data so that we're not irresponsible. But it's remarkable to me how talking about disparities in policing as a general matter is not persuasive. Talking about an individual person who who was affected by a negative experience with the police, that is super persuasive. And I just think that we've lost some ability to talk at a human-to-human level, which is ultimately a much more persuasive way to discuss these issues.
What's fascinating about that Arthur Brooks mentioned that about individual storytelling, is another point. I like to think of it as a reason for optimism, that we actually do have a lot of common ground, because critical race theory, for example, which the right hates, this is it tends to be very liberal classes. Critical race theory, their main premise is storytelling too, right? In the sense that that's a way of conveying messages, but.